You were that in it.
I was in it.
You were in it.
I was gone from the beginning of the movie.
Oh, this is better. Ooh. The costume's a bit much. It's so tight.
Перед лицом непростой и далеко не однозначной международной обстановки мы готовы с Россией наращивать стратегическое взаимодействие, предоставлять друг другу возможности развития, быть глобальными партнерами на благо народов наших стран и в интересах стабильности во всем мире.
Jetzt der Verkehr. Vorsichtige Autofahrer auf der A3 Oberhausen Richtung Arnhem ist die linke Spur aufgrund eines Zuvorabsturzes gesperrt. Bitte bilden Sie an der Rettungsgasse. Jetzt der Verkehr. Vorsichtige Autofahrer auf der A3 Oberhausen Richtung Arnhem ist die linke Spur aufgrund eines Zuvorabsturzes gesperrt. Bitte bilden Sie an der Rettungsgasse. Jetzt der Verkehr. Vorsichtige Autofahrer auf der A3 Oberhausen Richtung Arnhem ist die linke Spur aufgrund eines Zuvorabsturzes gesperrt. Bitte bilden Sie an der Rettungsgasse.
И если вдруг кто-то не понял, для вас объясняю еще раз. Смонтируем же потом, да?
And how is someone like Robbie or the Black Eyed Peas supposed to highlight it? Are they going to make a speech on the stage? Of course they're not.
You can highlight it.
What, during a match?
Well, highlight it during the commentary.
It's the kick-off here in this appalling country's human rights record, and honestly, I think, oh, someone's kicking a ball, but honestly, the amount of immigrant workers who died, it's a shocker. Oh, it's a goal!
Nobody seems to be winning here except the corrupt funders.
There are a lot of MPs winning. The Qataris have spent more money on entertaining MPs in the last couple of months than ever before. I wonder why.
Thank you, Kareem. So, you're asking oil companies to further lower gas prices. What makes you think that they are going to listen to an administration that is ultimately trying to put them out of business?
How is the administration trying to put them out of business?
Well, they produce fossil fuels, and this president says he wants to end fossil fuel.
Thanks, everybody.
3, 2, 1. Weapon.
What the fuck?
Pointez! Dégagez prêt. Stand-by. Non, tu stand-by. Stand-by! Oh! Deflection! 3162! 3162, very much! Quadrant! 1192! 1192, very much!
Staying with Christmas presents for the moment, despite the economic crisis, or maybe because of it, people have been spending money like water this Christmas. But how many presents are a waste of money?
Now, what do you do if your hair gets tangled? Why, you buy a brush like this for 50p and you brush your hair. Ah, no cry, Philips. Buy this instead. Because Philips say this is no ordinary hairbrush. This is an electric hairbrush. And how much does this untangler cost? Why, £4.50.
And welcome to Chasing Dissent, episode 187. Unfortunately today it's just me, chaps, so we will proceed.
Welcome to my party, we're just getting started. A life is a dream or a nightmare scarring. Hand me a drink cause I think I'm going all in. Get me a shrink who can catch me when I'm falling. Cover up my scars, flip the handlebars. Crashing in my car, wake up in a bar. I'll be a superstar, just on my avatar. This world is so bizarre.
And straight in today, so we've got to talk about Andrew Bridgeton, who's had the Tory whip removed. So he was suspended from Parliament for breaches of lobbying rules, remember. But now he's being he's had the Tory whip removed because of his statements regarding vaccines and alleged things he's supposed to have said that actually were quotes from other people. So, what's an MP supposed to do? Is he supposed to follow the party line, or is he supposed to represent the people that elected him to represent them? So my view would be that anyone, regardless of which party they fall into, should be representing the people that elected them. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they should follow the party line. In fact, he should go beyond that. He shouldn't actually just be representing the people who elected him. He should be representing all the people in his constituency, regardless. Just because a majority of those people elected him to represent them, and I use the term majority in a loose term because sometimes people get elected with 25-30% of the vote, so they're never even elected with a majority. So let's say 30% of the people elected them. That means there's another 70% of the people who didn't elect him, either didn't vote or they voted for someone else. Now, is he supposed to ignore their wishes? Well, no, he shouldn't, because he should be representing everyone in his constituency. So if he's failing to do that, then his constituency should be the people that censor him. Not Parliament, not the government, not the party he's affiliated to. They shouldn't be censoring him because he's representing the will of the people, is he not? But this pretty much sums up where the party system just fails miserably, because we're censoring people that are saying things that may be their opinion, but may also be the opinion of the people that he represents. I don't know. But should he be censored from saying anything? Nobody's producing any evidence to say what he's saying isn't true. And nobody's producing any evidence, despite what people are saying about saving lives, to say that that is true. So the next thing is they start blaming him for comparing something to the bad thing that happened in the world that no one is allowed to question, because it's a very bad thing and it happened, and you will get censored or even put in jail in some countries for daring to question. But he didn't question it. He didn't say it didn't happen. What he said was someone told him that it was the worst thing to happen to humanity since the bad thing. So how is that racist? How is that anti-Semitic? I don't understand. And this clown, Hancock, jumps on it straight away. Just jumps on it straight away because he has to be seen. Mummy, Daddy, look at me. Give me validation. Give me vindication. Buy my book. Nobody bought your book, mate. But yeah, I'm going on TV. He's done worse than Bridgeton's done. Now, at least Bridgeton's been standing up and saying what maybe he believes or what his people believe, or maybe he's just lost it a little bit, but at least he's actually there and present, unlike Hancock, who just disappeared for 2 months, despite still collecting his pay. I bet he didn't not get paid. This man really disgusts me. He's just horrible. So it would seem to me that the Tory party don't want Bridgeton questioning any part of the narrative. Therefore, if he's not going to question the narrative, if he's going to question the narrative, they throw him out. So he's no longer part of their party. It's disingenuous at best. It's manipulative. But hey, that's the Tory party. And then we have Facebook. Facebook wades into the fray, don't they, with Full Fact, because Full Fact are Facebook's fact checkers, aren't they? And they're funded by Zuckerberg. And they have obviously now become not only a fact-checking organisation, but political activists, because they have written to the Conservative Party chairman, Nadeem Zawai. Now, this guy is always there. What has he got on senior people in the government? Because this guy's not been out of a senior post since when? You know, really. He appeared as the czar, the vaccine czar, and he's never come out of a senior post since. Despite 3 changes of leader, he's still gone through it all. So what does that tell you? He's got something on them. He's I think the whole system's rotten from the core. It really is. What can you do? You can't carry on with this kind of system, and how do you change it? Because the system is such that it's rigged that you will never be able to change it effectively from the inside. I mean, you talk about proportional representation, you talk about, you know, what's happening in Scotland with second votes and all that. It doesn't work. It just gives you a party that will never have a majority and has to make allies with small parties to make sure that they can carry out legislation. It's time to dissolve this. It's time to start doing direct democracy like Switzerland or something similar, because this just isn't working and it needs to be changed. And unfortunately, without it changing, the country's going to go down the tubes. And to effect the change, I think the country's got to go down the tubes as well. So no matter how you look at it, this country is screwed. I don't think there's a way forward. That's the problem. Anyway, let's move on to America yesterday morning, when all, not thousands, I believe all US flights were grounded for a couple of hours before 9 o'clock. And obviously that then had a big knock-on effect. So the FAA are saying their system, their control system went down. This is the first time that there's been a mass grounding of flights since 9/11. So what happened? Well, technical glitch, but really? A technical glitch grounding every flight in the States? That sounds weird. I think we're going to have to keep an eye on this and see if there's anything else comes out of it. It's just one of those odd ones, you know. Why would every plane be grounded? Was there something coming down from above? Were we being visited? I don't know. I'm just spitballing now, people. But yeah, very, very weird. My audio's in and out. Oh dear. How can this be? Sorry about that. Is that better? Is that picking up better? If my audio's going in and out, I would hope it's not. It wouldn't be chasing Dissent without problems, would it? Right, how are we doing now? How are we doing now, people? It's looking like I'm getting to the top of the yellow bars, so that should be good audio. If it's not, please let us know. Now, we reported on this yesterday. Classified documents were found in Joe Biden's private office, and it appears that they now contain ties to Ukraine. Now, we know that there always has been tenuous links to Ukraine from Joe and his son Hunter, because the big man's always been involved there. Remember when he's on file as boasting that if that attorney wasn't fired, you know, the chief prosecutor in Ukraine, if he wasn't fired within the hour, then they weren't getting their money. And now Ukraine seems to be getting more and more money from Biden. So what exactly is going on? You know, is the money laundering gone sour? Oh, did I say money laundering? I meant has things changed? But anyway, so regardless of what you think about Trump taking away declassified documents, because remember, Trump was a sitting president and therefore has the capability of declassifying any document, whereas Biden, who took those documents, was only the vice president and does not have the ability to declassify documents. So Biden took classified documents, and that is illegal. So Biden's committed a definite crime, and Trump maybe hasn't. So, interesting. Another one that we'll need to keep tabs on, isn't it? Mike Lynch, this guy, I don't like this guy. I mean, I think he styles himself as a modern day working man in the vein of Scargill, perhaps. I didn't like Scargill either. It's a strange one. Well, it's not really, because I think, and I'm on record as saying that the reason that the unions are being so obstreperous is they want a change of government. Because if you're a union, and if you work as a union or work in a union, then you get treated better by a Labour government than you do as a Tory, or with a Tory government. Therefore, it's always in the union's interest to bring down a Tory government. And at the moment they smell blood, because let's face it, the Tory government is completely unelectable with Rishi Sunak. And that's something that we put in the book months ago. We said if Rishi Sunak gets in, they will never get re-elected. And they won't. So I don't understand, one, why Rishi Sunak was so desperate to get in, because unless he's incredibly stupid, naive and narcissistic, he must realise that he can't turn the British public round to liking him. One, he talks to you as if you are a moron. He really does. You think you were in, the primary school class that get held back 2 years. So when you turn up in high school, you're like 18 and everybody else is 14. Because you've been held back that much, because that's the way he talks to you. He just talks down to you as if you're scum, a piece of dirt on his shoe, perhaps. The man has no redeeming features, in my view, whatsoever. He doesn't seem to have a grasp of economics. He seems to think it's a surprise that the country's not doing very well, despite him being the Chancellor, while he presided over the ruination of small business, of people's lives, of the country as a whole. It still seems to have come to us as a surprise to him. But back to Mick Lynch, just a horrible, horrible man. I don't like him at all. I don't think he's got any redeeming features either. Just because someone is nasty to the Tories doesn't make them a nice person. And I know they say the enemy of your enemy is your friend, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes they're just all enemies and they're all against you. So the actor, not this actor, the other actor, Vladimir Zelensky UA, he addressed the Golden Globes last night. And our point is what? Well, he's begging for more money, isn't he? But this clown, Sean Penn, who's been there a couple of times, he's been to the war zone, because it's so dangerous that actors, politicians and everybody gets to go there. Bands go there and provide concerts and things, they play in the subways and everything. So, yeah, it's a horrible place to be in, but everybody goes. So he introduced it, and while he introduced him, he was crying. What was he crying for? Has somebody cut off his funding stream? Has he been told he's not getting to play Zelensky in the next movie, the movie of his life? So, I don't know. And, the propaganda war is ramping up in some amount these days, because, so they're now, this is the Telegraph. The Telegraph was supposed to be a highbrow purveyor of news, but again it's just jumped on this narrative that Russia is losing 500 soldiers a day as battle for Solidar rages. I'm not convinced, and if Russia is losing 500 soldiers a day, with the ratio being tentatively put in at 1 to 10, and that's the American intelligence services that have said it's a 1 to 10 ratio. So for every 1 Russian killed, 10 Ukrainian soldiers go down. So that would mean 5,000 Ukrainian soldiers a day, and that's not sustainable. So I don't think Russia's losing that. If Russia's losing 5, then maybe Ukraine's losing 50. If Russia's losing 50, then Ukraine's losing 500. But no matter how much propaganda you throw at this, Ukraine is going to run out of people before Russia. And when Ukraine runs out of people, what happens then? Meanwhile, the global power that is the United Kingdom has signed a historic agreement with Japan that allows us to put soldiers on the other country's ground. So that gives the UK access to Japanese bases. What for? What for? To protect Taiwan? Really? Because it's just... What does Britain hope to achieve? I mean, if the Falklands happen today, and don't tell Argentina, but if the Falklands happen today, we couldn't take them back. We don't have the capability anymore. We don't have the manpower. We don't have the sea power. We just don't have. We don't have the will. We just couldn't do it. Britain as a global power has failed. The only reason we're a global power now is because we've still got a vote in the UN Security Council. And really, that's it. The UK is a third-rate nation, and it's rapidly becoming a third-world nation. And unless that changes, then these things are just virtue signalling and lip service to what once was a proud and effective nation, but is no longer, and it pains me to say it. What can you do? What can you do? It is a third world. You're right, Artifact in reality. Where is the first world? It's a good question. Where is the first world? Probably the Far East. Places like Malaysia, Indonesia, whatever. They're probably less affected than anyone else. Not China, because China's a country of very contrasting abilities and what would you say? Poverty, richness, it just has a lot of contrast in it. Oh, anyway, let's move on. Now, Plymouth Crown Court have found this guy guilty of kidnapping a young woman who cannot be named for legal reasons before he then blah 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 assaulted her, right? And his name is Yusab Woldydab or whatever. Now, what gets me is the people read this and go, why can't he be named? Well, his name's right there in the tweet. It's right there in the tweet. So just spend some time and don't jump to conclusions thinking that everything's trying to hide everything. I mean, the guy's been found guilty, he's going to jail, and his name is there. It's the young woman who can't be named for legal reasons, probably because she's underage. And obviously you want to protect her identity. So that's why the person's not named. And that, to me, seems fair. But don't knee-jerk and don't read things before you respond to them. Take a bit of time. Because we've all done it. We all fire off. And then sometimes you've got to think, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that, or that's not correct because I read it wrong. So just spend some time. Meanwhile, Sydney, the beautiful city of Sydney in Australia, has smashed a 140-year-old weather record as the city has failed to see a day hotter than 30 degrees C in almost a year. Now, that's Sydney just come to the end of this, or it's coming to the end of the summer, and it hasn't seen a day beyond 30 degrees. I was in Sydney in 1988, the city, and it was oppressively warm. But you know what? Weather changes from year to year and day to day, and you get things like La Ninas and El Ninos and all that, and they make big differences to the weather patterns, especially on large islands like Australia, like coming across the Pacific, coming across the Atlantic. So these things are not unusual. Now, we make them unusual because we seem to attribute everything that happens in the world to us. And that's not how it works. You know, there are a lot of influences on what's going on in the world, and very little of them are affected by what we do. Most of them are natural. You know, for instance, a volcano pops off and, you know, it's put more carbon into the atmosphere than the human race has ever. And I mean ever. So, you know, when these things happen, it puts our efforts to damage the climate in perspective, because, as I said, a volcano will put more CO2 into the atmosphere than we have ever. The sun goes through warming and cooling periods, and it has an effect on the planets, because when you look at the temperature on the Earth and say it's cooling, right, and you look at the rest of the solar system, all the other planets are getting colder as well. And then you do the opposite and the Earth's getting warmer, and you look at the solar system and all the other planets are getting warmer as well. Do you think it might have something to do with the sun? I think it might. Yeah, more tax to save the weather. Yeah. That's probably true. Speaking of the weather, so why did the Met Office remove this paper from their website, which was talking about the recent pause in global warming? And I'm not talking climate change here, I'm talking specifically, there was a pause in global warming from about 1990 something. There hasn't been an increase in global temperature for almost 30 years, but this paper has now been removed from their website because the data appears to have been adjusted, and this to me seems quite disturbing, because there is always this attempt to go back and rewrite history or avoid parts of it. Could you remember Michael Mann when he produced his hockey stick that Al Gore, you know, loved and touted round the world to show evidence? But they took the bit out before it where things were really, really cold, and it made it look really, really dramatic, when it, in perspective, it shouldn't have. And we've shown you graphs on here that show you that we're actually at probably one of our lowest points for CO2 at the moment, and pretty far down in the temperature scale. So we're getting towards an almost ice age. So I'm not quite sure why people want to rewrite the data all the time, other than the fact that there's money in following the current thing. Because if you don't follow the current thing, you don't get funded. And this even goes back, if we think back to things like redshift. You know, planets are, they work out how far away planets and stars are by the redshift that they exhibit as they're moving away from us. Right? And then people go and take observations they take observations, and the observations don't concur with the theory or the hypothesis, and that's a problem, because if redshift is true and is effective exactly as reported, then planets that are adjacent, or stars and galaxies that are adjacent to each other, when you actually see them, and you can see the connections of plasma type material, gas between them, right, are moving apart at wildly different speeds and should be completely divorced from each other, and yet they're not. So the people that start pointing this out suddenly lose their telescope time. They suddenly lose their funding. They become destitute because they have no way of providing, you know, for their family anymore, because effectively they've lost their job. So they lose tenure, they lose their university positions, you lose their telescope time, and suddenly they're nothing. And this happens in all the sciences. Science is ruined. Because when you've got people funding it with an agenda, then that's not science. That's just you trying to prove things to suit yourself. And that's not science. Now, Mr. Ball made a tweet today, and it's interesting. I know there's a lot of anger out there, calls for revenge and fury at the government and the media. At times I too have said and tweeted things that were inflammatory. I now regret that. The more we attack them, the more they will circle the wagons and shoot back. Okay. where are you going here, Mr. Bolt? So then he goes, if we want to achieve our ends, we need to be more conciliatory and more understanding. Firstly, our main aim must be to encourage them to listen to our eminent scientists and clinicians, to invite our knowledgeable people to sit at the table with them and listen to their proof. Well, I would submit to you, Mr. Bow, that this doesn't happen, and it's not going to happen because, again, what we have is we have an agenda, a narrative, if you may, that needs to be followed. And if that narrative's not followed, people will start to lose significant amounts of money. And those significant amounts of money are provided by companies that provide things that are required to treat things. So if you disrupt that narrative, who wins? Who wins other than people who maybe shouldn't have been treated or maybe suffering from treatment? But who actually wins? Because none of the people in a position to take any kind of action are going to win. You know, the government don't win, the big corporations don't win, Big Pharma doesn't win, doctors don't win because they stop getting their kickbacks. The NHS doesn't win because it maybe loses funding as well. So who's actually going to win if you actually manage to get people to talk and they start to make changes? And this, in my view, is why we're never going to see anyone called to account for this, because there's way too much money involved. And many people have made so much money that the only people that are going to ever get pulled up are maybe people like Matt Hancock's pals or whatever that he gave contracts to when he shouldn't have. It's too big. It's too big for this to fail. It's too big and it's too organised, and there's way too much money involved for them to pay any attention to what are effectively a small group of outliers. You know, I mean, yes, there are perfectly respectable and Nobel-winning scientists out there pointing things out, and I on some occasions definitely believe them. Other occasions I maybe question what they say, but that doesn't matter because they are outliers in the grand scheme of things, and they're not going to provide any money, because the first casualty of any war is truth. And we've seen that, you know, playing out right now in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. But it's not just war, it's war on your people, like we've seen over the last 3 years. And the very first casualty was truth. Because, you know, Boris Johnson turned around at the start and said, we'll play this out, we'll see how it goes, there's no need to take any, you know, drastic action. And 4 days later, we were all locked in our houses and told not to speak to each other. 4 days, that's how long it took, you know, because they just lie all the time. So the casualty is truth, and then thereafter, what did we get? We got nothing but a bombardment of brainwashing style propaganda. 3-word slogans repeated 3 times. 3-word slogans repeated 3 times. And that just goes on and on and on. 3 words repeated 3 times. And that brainwashes you eventually. And that's what's happened. 80% of the population are complete and utter sheep. And there is no hope. There is no hope for them, because they are now in a situation where if they're coming out of it, they are coming out of it one at a time, but they're coming out of it too slowly. And it's too late. They're still, I mean, this is now year 4. It's almost year 4 of this alleged emergency situation. You still can't travel to America unless you've been treated. It's year 4 and people are still doing things that have been proven to have no effect on viruses. They're still doing it. And they're still taking things that we've seen people suffer from. So what hope have you got? Because if they're getting their news from the mainstream media, they're lost. They're completely and utterly lost, because it has proven itself to be nothing more than a complete and utter propaganda wing of government. And that's all it is. And it's probably all it ever has been, with the odd thing thrown in. Because when you think about it, the mainstream media really softball government all the time. They don't give them a hard time. One or two, maybe occasionally. But, I mean, look at Scotland. They just don't give the government, the pretendy government up here a hard time at all. They get softballed on every occasion. And they get away with it. Oh, what was saying in the chat? Stay safe, yeah, stay safe. Yep, Green Cross Code, that's right. Green Cross Code was a brainwashing technique and useful to get it into kids' heads, Just as well we never swapped to driving on the other side of the road, or everybody in that generation would have been wiped out, wouldn't they? Look left. Look right, look left again. And when you go abroad, you actually have to think, what way am I looking when you cross the road? Because it does make a difference. It does. Speaking of the banks and the Bank of England, so Jacob Rees-Mogg says the Bank of England has let the country down. So the Bank of England has to blame for failing to curb inflation, according to Jacob Rees-Mogg. Now, I have done some economics in my educational past, and I can't figure out how, when you've shut an economy for, let's say, 2 years, okay, and then restricted trade, restricted output, restricted services. How are you supposed to avoid inflation? Because you've basically shuttered an economy and not let it start up properly, put thousands, if not tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands of people out of work. Stop tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of small businesses. That's a whack of money to take out of the economy. And then you start giving away money to a proxy war that's occurring in the middle of Europe that really shouldn't be affecting us at all. And then you allow massive profiteering by fossil fuel companies on oil and gas. And when I say massive profiteering, I mean massive profiteering, because why are fuel costs still as high as they are when they're now below where they were before all this started? So these things are still being allowed, and it benefits the government. It doesn't benefit the government to put a cap on, to put a real cap on rising fuel costs, because the government gets a good tax off it. So if they put a cap on it, they lose some of their tax. It's just a disgrace. It really is. Oh, and here we go. This is Scotland. Well, this isn't Scotland. This is an SNP MP. So today I held the UK government to account for their reckless approach to Brexit, which has been forced on Scotland against our will. Well, we'll come back to that. The only way to escape the harms of Brexit and is to rejoin the EU with independence. Now, hold on a minute. We had this thing called a referendum, and the people of Scotland were asked whether they wanted to remain in the UK or not. And they said, yes, we want to remain in the UK. Now, foolishly, they then continued to elect an SNP government. I have no understanding why, but they did. We then have a referendum where do we wish to remain in the EU or not? And as a nation, and when I say nation, I mean the United Kingdom, we voted no. We wish to leave the EU, okay, which we then did. That was called Brexit. Now, because Scotland as a portion of the EU voted to remain doesn't mean that that has any relevance in those votes, because as a complete and utter country, Scotland voted to remain with the UK. Therefore, if you vote to remain with the UK, you vote to remain with the UK's decisions and be part of those decisions. So this has nothing to do with Scotland being taken out against its will. Scotland voted to remain in the UK, and therefore anything that happens as the UK, Scotland voted to be part of. So it doesn't matter. They're wrong. The SNP are wrong. The SNP need to be removed. The SNP have no raison d'etre anymore, because independence is never going to happen. And if it does happen, it will be the utter, complete ruination of Scotland. Germany. Now, we don't often hear of riots in Germany, do we? Well, they have the odd one. But so they're having a riot in this village because the people don't want the village to be demolished, because the Germans are having to demolish the village because they're going to scoop the coal out that's underneath it. Because Germany needs coal. Because what did Germany do? Germany made knee-jerk reactions to the Fukushima disaster. Germany, well known for being overwhelmed by tsunamis on a number of occasions. So Germany made a knee-jerk reaction to the Fukushima disaster and shut down all its nuclear power plants. And then what happened? Well, then they were completely reliant on Russian gas, and then Russia went to war. Well, Russia had a special military operation in Ukraine. The world went nuts and shut down the use of Russian gas, and Germany ends up with nothing to power itself with. So they're now talking about building nuclear power stations, and they're certainly opening coal-powered stations as fast as they can. Oh, and then they go fight about it. So where's the eco-warriors here? Getting turfed out of an abandoned village because they need it. They need the coal. We promised to keep you up to date on this. This is the University of Idaho murders, where the four? Where these kids were, students were murdered, and it looks like Brian Kohlberger has made a number of mistakes that has led to him being charged with it. We're still waiting for him to go to court to plead, but he has been charged with these murders, and it appears that he's maybe not as bright as he thought he was, because his phone tracked him, and he made a number of visits to the premises of the now deceased at 2-3 o'clock in the morning. Now, I'm not saying he went into the premises, but he was in the immediate locale, so it may appear that he'd been surveilling them. So I kind of think this guy might be going down for this, but we'll keep you posted on what happens there. Goldman Sachs. So speaking of banking, it appears that there's a bit of a problem, because Goldman Sachs have fired a lot of people. Now, we don't know exactly how many, but they arrived at their work. They were immediately given notice, and then escorted. Well, their passes and everything were removed, and they were escorted from the building under security. So that's them all out, and there's some numbers being bandied about of up to 3,200 from all across the banking. Now, the consumer banking arm of Goldman Sachs has never made a profit, apparently. So this guy, what's his name? David Solomon. He's brought down the axe on thousands of employees. So Goldman Sachs looking to try and hang on to its position as a bank, by the sound of things, by cutting to the bone. Now, in this day and age, that's what's going to happen, because the days of being fat are over, I think, and I mean that figuratively, for companies, because you can't afford to have employees that aren't doing anything. Look at Twitter. I mean, what was the first thing Musk did? He cut a number of posts from Twitter, and Twitter's still running. It seems to be running better than ever. So I can't see the problem. So this Amtrak train was delayed for 37 hours. And people were obviously getting worried about their safety and started calling the police, saying that Amtrak were holding them hostage. which prompted Tannoy announcements to come over the train, saying the train is actually broken. Please don't call the police. We are not holding you hostage. 37 hours is a hell of a time to be stuck in a stationary train. And I think I'm going to wrap up early again. Obviously, I go through these things too quickly without my friend Ben. But I'd like you to meet Bradley Fiegel. So this is Bradley Fiegel at 32 and Bradley Fiegel at 27. They are not the same person. They do not live in the same place. They did have exactly the same elbow injuries that got operated on at almost exactly the same time. They have been confused because they both play baseball. They are not related. They are not related at all. But that's quite a coincidence, isn't it? So Bradley Fiegel and Bradley Fiegel, not related, no DNA connection whatsoever. But quite interesting and quite a humorous one for us to end on. Yes, it could be Henry Hewitt, couldn't it? It could be. You could put Henry Hewitt in there. And stay tuned. There may be developments on this channel with Henry Hewitt. You may see something coming up. Maybe even as early as tomorrow night. Now, what I would like to remind you of is that we would appreciate any donations that you can make to keep this fine channel going and to keep giving you the news and opinion. And it's only our opinion, remember, because we're not asking you to do or believe anything other than do your own research. So if you wish to, you could become a Patreon at patreon.com/Chasing Dissent, or support us on Coffee at ko-fi.com/Chasing Dissent, and we would appreciate that. You can see it down there in underneath the slides. We will be back tomorrow morning at 7:30 on Rise with Sonia Poulton on BNT. So we'll be up there bright and early. It'll be both I and Ben will be there, and we'll be back as always, and looking forward to it very much, on Friday evening at 9 o'clock, where we go all in. So with that, I'd like you. Oh, I sound calm. Oh, thank you, Trudy. I don't know if that's a good thing. Do you want me to sound calm without Ben? I mean, Ben does frustrate me at times. He's a passionate man. I can be passionate as well. But I think when you're delivering the news on your own, it's difficult when you don't have someone to bounce off. And you know, we had hoped that Adam would have been able to join me this week, but unfortunately that's not been the case. But with that, I'd like to thank you all for attending this episode 187 of Chasing Dissent Live with me, John, and I'll see you tomorrow night at 9 o'clock. Be safe, everyone.
'Cause I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Yo, I got a lot of shit to say, so I'ma do this every day. I'll be writing things until I'm fucking buried in my grave.